Well, hello everyone. Hello Lugano, what a great place to be. And I want to thank each one of you, each single one, for showing up today, because I believe that you are the ones that can carry the torch of financial freedom forward. One by one, we can change the world. So you might ask yourself, why and how did I set up to do that? Set out, leave my home, my family, become a digital nomad to share Bitcoin education with the people who need it the most? Well, it has very personal reasons actually, why we do the things we do. My grandmother's name was Nilichka. She was migrating as a child from the Kingdom of Bohemia at the time when the Austrian Empire was basically, like, Kingdom of Bohemia was a part of the Austrian Empire. And as such, we had a common currency, the crown. And the crown went into hyperinflation after the First World War in Austria. So inflation is part of my history. On top of that, my grandparents told me a lot about the time when the Nazis came to Austria, what happened to their Jewish friends, and the fact that they were listening to BBC radio, which could have brought them into an Arbeitslager. On top of that, I'm born as a lesbian. So the first 30 to 35 years of my life, even in Austria, I was being discriminated by law. I just couldn't do the same things as others did. I couldn't marry, I couldn't inherit from my partner. And these kinds of experiences made me question authority, rulers, and equality. So when I heard about Bitcoin the second time in 2017, I decided I want to contribute to this space. And I started my podcast in 2018. Then I wrote a book about Bitcoin for beginners. And then I founded a non-profit initiative which is based in Uganda. It's called Bitcoin for Fairness, with which we want to bring Bitcoin education to the ground in Africa. And as a result of that, I recently launched an online learning program called Crack the Orange, which is open to anyone in the world who is new and wants to learn about Bitcoin. And I'm going to tell you more about that later. In early 2020, before the pandemic hit, I visited Zimbabwe the first time, and I also went to Botswana in that year. And from that time on, I've spent in total around 12 months on the African ground in different countries, in Zambia, Zimbabwe, Ghana, and South Africa. And I'm going to go there again at the beginning of December to the second edition of the Afro-Bitcoin conference. And from my experiences, I want to share with you how I think that Bitcoin empowers Africa. Let's take a look at that map. It shows you the countries which are the worst authoritarian countries in the world. And as you can see, most of these are in orange and green, orange and red, of course, and they are in Africa. So 55% of the global population live in authoritarian-led countries. And hand in hand with that goes the next map, which shows the wealth in these countries. And by the orange and red, you can see also the poorest countries are in Africa. So there is something, it's not a coincidence. In a dictatorship, the infrastructure is so broken that people cannot plan resistance or build power to topple their dictator. When inflation goes rampant, you have no time or no chance to save or plan for a future, for a better future. And we often hear inflation, hyperinflation. I mean, we experience it a little bit here now too, but what does it actually mean? This is a typical Zimbabwean bread. Everyone is eating it. And at the beginning of 2019, it cost $1. And then the government had the idea to reinvent or reissue the Zimbabwean dollar. And what they did was they forcibly exchanged all US dollar accounts in Zimbabwe to the new Zimbabwean dollar. So you had maybe $5,000 in your bank account, suddenly you had 5,000 Zimbabwe dollars. And the government promised, it stays the same, no worries, the exchange rate will stay the same. What happened was, When I came the first time in 2020, the exchange rate was 1 to 28. So 1 year after the reissuance of the Zimbabwean dollar, people had to pay 28 Zimbabwean dollar instead of 1. And then in 2023, in January, when I was there, the exchange rate was already 1 to 850. And in May, it went to 4,000. And now it's like about 5 to 6,000. So now you need 6,000 Zimbabwe dollar for what cost you 1 Zimbabwe dollar only 4 years earlier. And there's a reason why many African countries try to ban Bitcoin. Authoritarians don't like Bitcoin, because if we're Zimbabweans and other people in other African countries or authoritarian-led countries were to start using Bitcoin instead of their traditional currencies, they could dry out their dictators and their authoritarian rulers. Another option is hydropower. I mean, many African countries, they are very rich. They have a lot of natural resources and gold. And if instead selling out all these resources to our countries and indebt themselves, if they were to start Bitcoin mining, they could basically build their own reserve. They could build wealth and gain more independence. The next topic is banks. The banking system in many African countries is really broken. You can't compare it to our banking systems. And for instance, the fees in South Africa for banking are higher than those in Germany. So how does that work? I know people in Zimbabwe who unbanked themselves. They are now living off their Bitcoin that they exchange to US dollars as needed. Also, Bitcoin enforces freedom of speech and freedom of association. In the End SARS movement in Nigeria, the Nigerian Feminist Coalition was collecting donations from abroad to support the protests against police brutality. And then the central bank shut down their bank account. And the ladies remembered there's something like Bitcoin. They set up a BTC Pay server and could receive donations again and support the protests. But these are all things that only work when you hold the keys to your Bitcoin. Only self-custody gives you that power of Bitcoin as a tool for freedom. And this is also an interesting number. It's the average age of African people on the continent. Whereas this is the average age in Europe. What do you think? Where will be a new technology adopted faster, where people are younger, more open to new technologies, and also where they need it more because the financial abuse is much higher than here? I think it's a no-brainer what will happen. So how do Africans now empower Bitcoin? Because this is not a one-way street. This is a map by Bitrefill. It shows that the size of the cryptocurrency ecosystem on the African continent, is lower compared to its size and its population than on other continents. But there's a difference in the use cases. In the north here, it's more a store of value. It's a long-term investment. We can save money. And in the south, in the poorer regions, it's more a medium of exchange. It's being used daily as a tool to be able to send and receive money because there's a lot of financial oppression in these countries. And only Bitcoin gives them the option to permissionlessly send money in and out of the country. So Bitcoin is both. It can be both. It's a store of value and a medium of exchange. And as such, it unites the North with the South and the South with the North. Bitcoin unites the world. And in many African countries, most exchanges with cryptocurrency happen on a peer-to-peer basis. They happen without KYC. And that's great for privacy. And it's also great for the North. Because imagine if millions of African people were to use Bitcoin without KYC, then we will always have a market for non-KYC Bitcoin. When I came in 2020 the first time to Zimbabwe and Botswana, I only knew of Satoshi Center in Botswana. It was the only Bitcoin initiative I had heard of. And since then, you can see a lot of educational initiatives and communities have been started. There are the Bitcoin cowries in Ghana, Bitcoin Data in Kenya, Bitcoin for Fairness in Zimbabwe, and of course, Bitcoin Ekasi in South Africa, and a lot of others as well. One by one, African people learn how Bitcoin can empower them, even if they don't have internet. How does that work? Well, there is a young South African developer. You will see him in the next talk here on the stage. And he built a tool called Machankura 8333, where people can send Lightning Bitcoin without the need to have internet on a regular phone. You don't even need a smartphone for that. And that's one example of the solutions that only people on the ground in these special situations can build. And therefore, also initiatives like Trust Builders, who are educating developers, African developers, are so important because only they know the challenges on the ground. And I can tell you from my own experience, they are so different than ours. And that's why I think it's really great to have these initiatives. And with my work with Bitcoin for Fairness, I also realized it's important to be there. It's important to build trust on the ground, to speak one-to-one with people. But there needs to be more than that. And in a fast developing technology like Bitcoin, there's also the need for continuous education and not only punctual education. Going there, onboarding someone to Wallet of Satoshi and going home is not education and not adoption in my belief. And that's why I founded Crack the Orange, which is an online learning program for anyone, but it has a special section basically for aspiring Bitcoin educators and community builders from countries who can't afford education. And there's a scholarship program for that. And Bitcoin adoption will skyrocket in the coming months and years in African countries. But Bitcoin is not perfect yet. We need scalable solution to onboard the first billion of users. We need more privacy in Bitcoin to protect individuals and especially human rights activists from digital surveillance. I always say we need solutions built especially for these dire and complicated situations, because if Bitcoin works in Zimbabwe, it will work anywhere. Some people then say to me, yeah, but that's an edge case. That's not happening here. We don't need that. And I say, exactly that are the use cases that will prove Bitcoin's uniqueness as a tool for freedom. And that's why Bitcoin needs you. You know, Bitcoin doesn't have a marketing department, so each one of us is a little bit responsible for adoption. So please learn about it, share it with your friends, especially share the knowledge about how Bitcoin is a tool for human rights activists and not only a speculation tool. Because that pulls off a lot of people who say, I'm not interested in Bitcoin, it's only about money, I'm not interested in money. But it's so much more. So I ask you, please do something in your own realm. And if this is not for you, then please, if you want to contribute, donate towards Bitcoin for Fairness so that we can go on doing the work for you. Thank you.